What I tell my team is like, I want you doing like 80% of what you love every single day. And if you're not on that percentage, then you're probably not going to be happy in the long run.
Welcome to Builders, Budgets, and Beers. I'm Reece Barnes, and I started this podcast to have real conversations about money in the building industry, the wins, the mistakes, and everything in between. I believe builders deserve to feel confident about their finances, and that starts by hearing from others who've been through it too. This industry can be slow to change, but the right stories and the right tools can make profitability feel possible. Let's get into it.
Mics are hot. You're loud and clear. You sound just clear as a bell, Matt.
You do too.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Is it show or podcast? I like saying coming on the show.
I like show. Yeah, it feels like a show listening to your other episodes.
Yeah, doesn't it? I appreciate you for being a committed follower too, by the way.
I've been spreading the word. It's good. I've learned some things from other builders you've had on, and it's good to listen to, traveling between job sites and just kind of taking in what you're sharing. So yeah, thank you.
Totally. I love it. Well, and that's, a little motivation for the listeners out there. We have a little committed follower that wants to jump on the show. Jump in my DMs. We could have you join.
For sure.
But no, Matt, okay, thank you so much. Let's give the listeners a little background on yourself, who you are, where you build, what you build, some of the basics.
Yeah, Matt Brill. I'm with Bauen Build, owner and founder. We are based in Boulder, Colorado. We work throughout the Front Range, but primarily in and around Boulder County. It's a really great place to work. We have a really fortunate benefit of having a lot of great architects in the region that are really committed to building and designing with building science at the forefront. And that's something we do not compromise on. So we typically, when we're meeting new clients or architects, we definitely say we're on the spectrum of building performance. We're on that passive house, or quote unquote high performance end of the spectrum. We are not, we're not in the business to building anything near code built homes. And we do all types of, finish levels. So we're doing some more basic homes where maybe the owners just really focus on building long-term durable structure. And then we do, on the higher end where, we might have, much longer schedule, much more dialed in details, a lot of higher end architectural finishes. So we're flexible on how it looks when it's delivered to the client, but we have a pretty hard floor on what that wall assembly and all the detailing that goes into building a really durable, long-lasting structure.
100%. Well, and that's so, first, for everyone listening, you should 100% check out Matt's work. It's Bauen, Bauen, build with a D.com. Check out his stuff because you'll see it, like just even like the architectural like design that you guys have, but I think like the quality of that you guys are building is great. And I think that would be interesting to jump into. But I think like primarily, and this kind of goes into the thing that I wanted to pick your brain on in this episode, which is like largely change management. We can start with just like over the years of you building, right? Build science is constantly evolving, always a new product, always a new theory, more science, more physics, more logic applied, right?
Yeah.
How do you stay on top of it? How do you apply it? How do you build that into a very competitive product in the market?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's so true. Things are evolving, by the month. And for me, it's reading and consuming, podcasts like yourself, videos online, talking to other builders. I have a really good network of builders in the region that, we partner with each other, help each other on maybe problems we're having. So it's a constant. You have to be constantly up to speed on both materials, systems, sequencing, and what we do in terms of, there's a lot of content available. There's a lot to integrate. And that can be overwhelming. And so as a team, one thing that we've done is as we learn these new things, either on our own projects, like, hey, I wish we would have done this differently, or let's do this differently next time. We integrate that into our template project schedule. And then we have a checklist associated with all the different phases of our projects. And I think we're over 2,000 items long on our checklist. So that's just like all the little things that you need as a site manager to remember when you're at that phase of the project. And we like that approach because if you had to look at a list of 2,000 items, you'd be like, oh my gosh, where do I start? So we really compartmentalize it into the different phases. So you don't have to worry about that until you're getting close to that phase of the project. Yeah, so it's a lot. And I think the other big thing is just partnering with your trade partners and architects to just like document lessons learned, like what went well, what didn't go well. Cause it's not just your team, it's all the other people around you that could have input or ideas to make the process, faster, better, more efficient. So yeah, it's a constant, and we're constantly looking at that as a team and making sure we're documenting it as we go and not just at the end of the project.
Totally. Well, okay. So that's actually, okay. So it's like, it's a continuous development. Wait, what do they call it? It's a CI/CD in the software world, continuous improvement, continuous deployment.
Nice. Yeah, it's what we're doing. And the funny thing, what makes it hard is that if we identify a new learning and we've already like spawned that new project and it's already underway, we have a whole tracking sheet to make sure that those future items are actually folded into that project. Because if it's already started, the template's no longer really relevant. And so it is a decent amount of work just for the in-flight projects to make sure you're incorporating those lessons learned in real time.
Totally. Well, it's kind of like, it's like job costing, right? I'm going to rope this back into financials, right? It's like, you're going to be like, you're getting invoices that are piling in. You've got projects that are starting and stopping, and they're in different phases. And you've got this like huge machine that's turning. But it's like, if you're just got an invoice for foundations and you're running a bid on a house and you're trying to like job cost and estimate it, it's kind of like having that real-time information and applying it
100%,
just like what you're doing with the build side. No, like we're talking about like product, right? Like build science, material. Okay. You made a comment about like almost like a reflection. I call it a post-mortem.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's like, I'm sure you run a post-mortem process.
Yep, we do.
With your projects.
And we try to not just have it be at the end. So we're kind of continually, especially as a team, it's not just at the end, because otherwise you're not going to remember the nuances of what that lesson learned was unless you kind of document it right away.
Totally. And I think, so this is like kind of like more of the general question that I'm like wanting to talk about, which we're already doing. But this is like the change management, right? It's like, it sounds like you've got a team that's like very much taking ownership of the projects. They care, right? Like they're taking the time to document these things as the build is going, right? Is that a you thing? Is that something that you've curated? Is this an employee thing? Like, why is this common in the industry?
Yeah, what do you think? Great question. I create the time and space for that to happen. I think you have to be soliciting it. You have to want that level of expectation from your team. I mean, we're a pretty small team. We're 6 people. Everyone has a combination of a building background and some other unique background, whether it's design or engineering. And so I think just like that holistic knowledge base that our team comes with to each project, it definitely is ingrained in them too. So I don't think if you had a team that wasn't necessarily interested in it and you're asking for it, you might not get that reciprocation. So I think it's both. You have to create the time and the space, but at the end of the day, you have to have a team that's interested in it and wanting to be better themselves on that next project and making sure that we're delivering even higher, whether it's air tightness on a blower door score. Like we are constantly trying to get that number down, and everyone is invested in it. And I think that mentality permeates through all the different components of a build.
Have you worked with or hired people that don't have that interest or want?
Yes, there was one, and I think it was interesting.
Past tense. Are they no longer with you?
Yeah, was.
Yeah.
And I think it was an interesting dynamic. Like I'd say a relatively skilled site manager, but didn't have that same passion, I think, to just continually improve and like take the time at the end of the day, or maybe you're super tired and you want to go home, but like, hey, let's just capture this quickly. And so I think, and that's why I think it's a two-way street. You can't just want it from your team. Your team is going to also have to really be invested to even take the time to document it, let alone share it with you.
Totally. But you made a comment of like, you have to create the time, create the space for it, right?
Absolutely.
And so what does that what does that tactically look like? Are you, is that an expectation set on the recruiting and interviewing process and then built into motion within the team and organization? Is it rigid? Like, hey, everyone needs to spend an hour a week reviewing their work and document? Like, what does this actually look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's three components. So we have a weekly production meeting that's a little bit more focused on, the tactical schedules, who's where, who's doing what. And then we have a biweekly team meeting, and then once a month lunch. So that gives us two times for a month for our team to just get together in a more casual setting. And I think that's where I'm putting those things on the agenda. Like, hey, we just finished this, let's talk about it. Or, the whole team can add things to the agenda if they want to bring up a certain topic. So that's the main space we create. And then it's honestly because we've gotten in this habit over a number of years. If something's on somebody's mind, they will just ping the team chat and be like, we need to do this differently next time. And then I'll fold it into our checklist, and then any in-flight projects get the same updates. And so it's really just kind of literally continual. And it's the mentality of the team members in the field are, I'm not going to wait for that team meeting. Like, this is on my mind now, I'm going to just share it. And I think that's awesome. And you'll see dialogue back and forth on our team chat thread of other ideas or components.
That's a beautiful thing, Matt. Do you recognize that? Do you like, I think it might, if you don't, it's a good opportunity to maybe like what you've done is not normal.
No,
That's great.
It's honestly, the team is, like most builders know, I mean, there's hundreds of people on a job site, so it permeates down to all the trade partners. But yeah, as a team, I tell my team a lot. Like last weekend, Friday, I was like, everyone was crushing it last week. It was busy, it was stressful. And I was like, just telling everyone, like, I'm thankful for all of you. And, just trying to not forget and not take for granted, like, all the brain power and stress and energy that everyone's putting forward for these projects. When you're building on that end of the spectrum of high performance, the sequencing and detailing is really immense, and it can be stressful. And so, yes, I recognize it, and I do try not to forget it, because it's pretty special.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's in your culture at this point, right? Yeah. This isn't really even like a conversation of like change management when it comes to this. It's an expectation. Actually, before I go down this path, question: you said you guys are communicating in your team thread. What do you guys use to communicate? Is it a text thread?
No, we use Google products. We have Gmail and all that. So we use just Google Chat, and we basically have a space, I think they call it, for every project. So we have, and most of the team members are on every project just so they can keep abreast, because we have a dedicated site manager, but definitely people are floating as needed. Mm-hmm. So we have a dedicated space for each project, and then we have a dedicated team chat where we're just like more generic stuff that are not project specific, where we can communicate. And we got a marketing channel, a social media channel. So like the different people that need to know certain topics, we can. So it's pretty much like Slack is what we've set up, but because we're already in Gmail, we kind of keep it in one ecosystem. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, that was more of a side note. I just did a post on this with like using Slack as like a client portal. Which that's more like client facing, but you're using it for chat. I just think it's interesting with like all the project management software out there in communications.
Totally.
Okay. So cool. So a lot of communication, and this, to tie it back into the change management side, is, again, this isn't like, oh man, like Matt's got us using a new building material and now we got to figure out how to do it right. And we like zip, or I don't even know. I'm terrible when it comes to the actual material side. Do you have pushback when people are like, we use this product and it sucked, or we use this product and we think it could be better and we want to use this product? Like,
it's funny. From change management perspective, is just coming to me, everyone's super open-minded. And I think there's two angles to talk about. One is on like the build side or the product side. And then the other is on just like the system side. And I think on the build product side, my team is definitely not shy. Like, if they don't like a product and they think there's a better something out there, they'll definitely not be shy to bring that up. And I'm generally very open, as long as it's like a high performing, high quality product, which they're not going to suggest something crappy. I'm always open to trying it. And we do experiment. Like, sometimes if it's like, we have a project right now where there's a garage, a separate structure than a house, and we're actually experimenting with two different materials. And then we're going to kind of decide which one we like the best, and kind of use that going forward, depending upon the type of structure. So I think it's definitely nobody's shy to bring up that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I think on the more like system side, I wouldn't say I get pushback, but like, we've implemented adaptive a few years ago. We use
Mm-hmm.
Builder Trend, and there's definitely a learning curve. And I think getting in the habit of like looking at the to-do items that are coming up, approving the bills and invoices in adaptive, like that has taken time to get people on board. And I think it's because they're so excited about doing the work in front of them that like that's kind of a distraction. And they're like,
Yep.
oh, you can worry about that. I don't want to have to worry about that. But at the end of the day, like I do need their investment, especially on like the adaptive side. Like we're getting enough bills each month that like I want their their sign off to make sure that they are good with what's being submitted, and we can accurately pay that.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely takes continual reminders, and I think they're finally getting on board with that. I think part of it's just like dialing in how that shows up in their inbox,
Mm-hmm.
and setting expectation of timing, because when I'm at month
Yeah.
end, like tomorrow I'm going to want to go through and approve everything, and if it's Friday night, I don't want to bother them to like, hey, did you look at this? Did you look at that? So they're now a little bit more in the same groove, but that took more time and effort, despite having a super smart team that's really invested in, kind of all aspects of the build. So I think there's still, and, I can imagine maybe a company that has maybe, less tech savvy team members, that can be a big lift. But I think at the end of the day, that's not a reason not to be using like first class, products and tools to just help you do a better job to deliver the project, better communicate with your clients, and ultimately like make your life easier at the end once you kind of get over that hurdle of implementation.
100%. Well, and that was like my like general takeaway when you're talking about like we've got a team that's on it. They're not shy about everything that goes into the quality of the product, the installation of the product, the outcome of the product. Like, but that's their world, right?
Yeah.
Like, these are like project managers. These are people that care. Like, I'm someone like you stick me on a job site and you like ask me like, Reece, what'd you think of these shingles? Or like I don't know. Like, what did you think of this LVL?
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, dude, it's a board. I don't know. Like, I
we
don't know.
have that conversation. Like, what do you think of LSL treated plates versus 2x6 treated plates? Like people, like our team geeks out on that. And, cause there's a cost difference and you have to weigh like, okay, was it worth the cost difference to have that LSL plate that's super straight? So yeah, they definitely geek out on it.
Yeah, okay. But so that's like reasonable, right? Like, so the change management isn't like, it isn't even a conversation when you get a team that's talking about something they care about.
Yeah.
Right. I think you bring up like the systems conversation, and that's like the adage as old as time, right? Is like another software, or I just got my team on this software, right?
Yeah.
And like, there's no way I could go to them and say like, we need to change it.
Yeah.
It's like my thesis is because for them, like they really don't care enough to track it. Their focus is on, again, like the material, the build side, but it doesn't really ever get like brought up as to how much more important could tracking your financials or tracking your project management, like how much more important could it be than the actual build side of it? It should be viewed as, this is coming from someone who's like sells software, right? Is in the software world, right? But it's like, it's the same thing. And from my point of view, now where does that fall? Because change management is like certainly a topic of conversation. Right. It's like you got all these softwares out here trying to make their product more intuitive and easier to adopt and more methodical and thoughtful in how they design it and build it. Like, how do you bridge that gap to get a team of builders, people that were born to work with their hands and be exceptional craftsmen, right, to associate approving bills or tracking budgets or weekly WIP reviews? Right. Yeah. Building that in and understanding like, okay, this is just like the numbers math side, but it's massively applicable to what I'm doing in the day to day in the field.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's two things. One is kind of like the blocking and tackling level. Like, you got to make it easy, so that you got to have laptops if you don't already have it. Like doing some of that stuff on your phone is not easy, and it's cumbersome. So I think everyone on the team has a laptop. So that's like the kind of the floor. I think you're right. And that at the end of the day, it is the same like outcome. Like at the end of we need to deliver that project. And part of delivering that project is that we have to bill, is that we have to have invoices. We've got to track payments. Like if that all falls apart, then the project doesn't get delivered. And
Right.
and so initially, like I kind of took on most of that workload. But now as we've gotten, larger projects, more projects, like I'm relying on the team and their own kind of stamp of approval on a certain item to make sure that I'm confident to then proceed to approve it myself. So really and we use it. We have a lot of mantras that we use. And one of them is like, what's best for the project, And so
Love it.
that mentality can pervade all types of what dilemmas or questions that you're facing, or maybe a difference of opinion with a trade partner. And like, let's take our egos out of the picture and say like, what's best for the project? What's best for the outcome? And so that's what I've been using lately with just trying to get people up to speed. Because the reality is like, I could probably approve 90% of the bills on my own and I know they're good to go. But I want to get the muscle memory in the team so that, if we do scale a little bit bigger, we can then do that in a way that I feel like it's sustainable from a financial perspective. And so that's what I've just been sharing is like, hey, I need your expertise because you're there all day long. Whether they did X, Y, or Z and whether that should be billed or not. And it goes with the perception of us as a company. If the client's a little shaky about, the bills and invoices we're sending over to them, like that's not even if we're building a great product in terms of the house, that's not a good feeling for a client to have. So it's the holistic view. And I talk about that all the time with the team, whether it's the cleanliness of the job site, how we're storing materials. Like, yeah, it probably doesn't really matter, but it also sends a strong message to everyone that shows up on site that there's an expectation of doing something differently here. And so I think that's maybe a channel by which, if you're struggling to get a team to adopt a new system, you can kind of leverage what they care about, which is the build, and say like, actually, this is just as important.
Totally. Do you have your project? And I think this is like pretty universal, but maybe not. But like when you're like comping your project managers, or like maybe like comping, but like their expectations, right? And like what they own and what they're in charge of owning is a part of that like budget.
For sure. Yeah.
Invoicing and cash flow. Go ahead.
Yeah. We have a structure of site managers at every job. And then we actually just hired our first project manager, like dedicated project manager. So previously it was either me or we have an operations director that we were basically acting as PM and kind of dividing up the project. So that really fell on us. And, it doesn't give me as much time to just go to the job site and just observe what's going on, and making sure my eyes are on the site, making sure that things are going to my expectations. And so we've hired a PM, and that is an expectation that they are owning that budget and owning all of the bills, making sure change orders are being issued to account for things that are changing or costs that are changing. So absolutely, it's in the job description. And I think it's as we've grown as a company, that becomes really, really important to instill that level of ownership and making sure they feel empowered.
Totally. Well, and I asked because it's like on time and under budget, right?
Yeah.
Which, like, what are two things that homes are never on time or under budget? You know what I mean? It's like the ultimate the point of emphasis.
Yeah.
But even more so is it's like upskilling your team, right?
Yeah.
Like just how you explain and articulate the buy-in and the communication and the trust and I'm trying to blank the word, doesn't matter. There's enough adjectives in there. Point being is like your team really cares about build science.
Yes.
Right. But like when it comes to like upskilling and being like, dude, like here's a WIP report.
Yeah.
Like, let's go through what a WIP report is. And like, of course, a WIP report is important for the accountants to close out the books and reconcile and make their entries and adjust for revenue and income. Right. But how do we make this about you? Right. It's like, how insane would that be if on like a weekly basis, you are going over WIP reports with your team and like, why are we overbilled on this? Why are we underbilled on that? What did we miss here? Maybe this was miscategorized. Like, how do we start squaring this up? And then there's like dedicated action items that are tied in
Totally.
to the stuff that they're doing on a weekly basis. I think that is the challenge. And that's where like when you think about an employee, right? It's like developing skills and becoming better. It's like, sure, the paycheck is like a part of it. And like, there's always going to be a level of people that's like, dude, I just don't care. Like, I'm here to close deals or I'm here to build houses, right? Like, I'll leave this up to you. But what's your take on that?
No, it's funny. And there's a couple of team members that I have that, they're super smart, super talented. And it's like, what's your trajectory? And, my vision was that they would kind of transition from a site manager to a project manager. But both of them were like, absolutely not. I do not want to have that level of responsibility. I don't want to be on my computer more than I'm on site. And so I think also recognizing it's not everyone wants to just continue to, quote unquote, move up the ladder. And I think it's having that dialogue with your team and making sure you have people in the right roles, that they're not feeling like they're doing activities that they're actually not super excited about it. My mantra is kind of, and I don't know what the right percentage is, but what I tell my team is like, I want you doing like 80% of what you love every single day. And if you're not on that spectrum, that level, that percentage, then you're probably not going to be happy in the long run. And so I think that's really key, is aligning that skill set and interest to the team member. Mm-hmm. So that's first and foremost. And I think, I've recognized that, and that's why hiring this project manager who has that interest in that background. And I think, to be honest, like as a team, we're still dialing in those systems and those forums to where we can have those kind of structured conversations. We're looking at each project, looking at the budget. We're laser focused on the schedule. Like that's something that we do every week with every site manager. And I would, so there isn't a lot of discussion of budgets with the site managers at the current time. And I would like them to have awareness, because I think they're generally aware of what's being spent, but they're not tracking this is 2% over, that's 5% under. They don't have that level of knowledge. But I think at the end of the day, to your earlier point, like it's scope, schedule, budget. So everything matters. And I think they're having at least a cursory knowledge of where we're at from a financial perspective at the site level. I think, will change how they approach the build in a good way, in a healthy way. But we haven't kind of exposed that side to the site managers, not because it's not something that we are uncomfortable exposing. It's just like they've got so much to focus on. But I think if we can dial in easy ways to summarize that, and with different reporting, I think that would be valuable.
For sure. And I think what you're bringing up is like a really valuable perspective for the listeners to consider, right? It's like, I completely agree with like, I want my team to be doing 80% of the stuff that they love doing, right? You're always going to have things that you have to do that you don't like to do, right? But it's recognizing what the talent is and what they're exceptional at. And then to your point, like, how long have you been in business, Matt?
It's 5 years as Bauen Bill. Did some other things before that, but 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been building the most beautiful custom homes in Boulder.
We've been super fortunate to have so many ground up projects, and it's the team, the clients, and the architects has been really impressive that we've been able to work with. So it's been great.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, but you're 5 years in, and like you're just hiring like your first like formal project manager.
Correct.
Right. And I think it's recognizing like, what do we have on the team? What are we missing from the team? And what is the person that we're going to be introducing? What are they going to be adding to the team?
For sure.
And I think to tie this back into the change management side is like, that could be a lot of where this like change management friction is coming from, is like, we're trying to change things that people just don't care about. Right. And there's only so much that you can do to communicate why something's important to someone that just doesn't care about it. Right.
Exactly.
It's like, of course you could explain it. Of course you could tie it back. But if that's not a part of their responsibility or their ownership or a level that they're wanting to explore, it ain't going to happen.
Totally. Absolutely.
So, I think that's important. Okay, so in terms of change management, I mean, I think we pretty much whip change management. Dude, talk to me a little bit about what you're most excited for at Bauen Build with this new project manager coming on.
Yeah, I think I'm really just excited about having someone else like with the like I love that aspect of the company, like the financials, the schedule, like I love that. And at the end of the day, it's kind of removing barriers for the site managers to then just allow them to do their job. And so what I recognize is that kind of just having two of us acting in that capacity and nobody dedicated to it is that some of those barriers that we're trying to remove, like maybe I had to put a little bit of that extra workload on the site managers, which then, maybe they didn't love that in terms of their 80% target. And that's overwhelming to then manage a full site. And can you help me get a few purchase orders out, for example? So I'm really excited about that, having that dedicated person to just removing those barriers. And that's how we framed it to the team too, because that even hiring a new person at like a new level can be intimidating maybe for a team. And I really framed it as like, look, this is about this new person is trying to remove things from your plate that are more administrative, like the change orders, the purchase orders, updating the schedule, managing the to-do list. And honestly, I think everyone was super excited because they're like, yeah, that sounds great. And so it's having, another dedicated head or person to help execute on those things has been really a game changer already. It's been 2 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm super excited about that.
Wait, okay, so they're already on the team.
They're already on the team. Yeah, they've been about 2 months in. They previously were a PM for like kind of civil construction, like earthwork type projects. So there's some learning on the building side. But yeah, they've hit the ground running, and it's been fantastic.
That's what I was going to ask. So it sounds like they came from the commercial world, the civil world. I hear that often.
Yeah.
Like you get a lot of these like commercial guys that come in and they're like working at larger organizations, and it's just like process, rigidity. This is how we do things. And they're like, I mean, there's so much of it in the commercial world, and it's just kind of like boring to a lot of people, but they just get so much exposure to it. Was that intentional when you were like seeking to recruit this person?
Yeah, the last 2 hires have been from the commercial world, and the reality is like the complexity and level of precision on our builds, like we're doing a lot of things that like would maybe quote unquote normally be done in a commercial setting, like really detailed submittals, super detailed scopes of work, and it's all about just and we definitely recognize that can feel a little overwhelming to like our trade partners. And the way we frame it to them is like, look, our job is to help you guys be successful. And again, what's best for the project, but make sure that project's delivered well. And it is more effort on our part, but we feel that small investment is so key to getting better estimates from subcontractors and being able to make sure that it's really clear what they're delivering. And so that's kind of par for the course in the commercial world. And I mean, there's builders that I know that maybe don't even have contracts, and it's just kind of some of that basic thing. So we're trying to just add a level of rigidity that's helpful, and then maybe remove some of the rigidity that's like maybe just for legal reasons, and trying to again just focus it on what's going to help this project be delivered in a better way.
For sure. What are you anticipating some of that like rigidity? That is more like for like, what are you anticipating?
Yeah, like, just really detailed change orders, detailed purchase orders. Like we have multi-page scopes of work for our trade partners, like all the expectations we have for the types of materials that we're expecting, because there's a lot of ambiguity. And sometimes leeway is okay, but like we've kind of dialed in what we like and what we expect. And so we feel like, let's just be super clear about that. And trying, like a good example is like, ideally that purchase order is approved before anyone starting a day of work, but like we might be a little flexible on that. Like maybe you're approving the day you're coming. That's an example of like on the commercial world is like you don't sign something, don't even show up. So we're trying to be pragmatic about it, because at the end of the day, if we're too strict, then that could negatively harm the project. So we recognize that it's not a 50-story building that we're building, but at the same time, having some structure in place, we 100% believe benefits everyone on the job.
Totally. I think this is like an interesting point with the like the rigidity and the process, and you're talking about like subcontractors and vendors, and some of this rigidity negatively impacting the project. Like when I think about why commercial or civil or larger contractors are able to get away with that rigidity, is because they have the leverage, they have the clout, they have the size of the project that
Yeah.
is enough of an incentive for a subcontractor vendor market to oblige by.
Yep.
Do you think that's where it lives and dies, or do you think that there's more to it? I'm essentially trying to figure out, why is there that level of flexibility
And the
in the
residential.
residential market, yeah, as opposed to the
You
commercial?
know, I think part of it is that at least historically it's been so relationship driven, and I think
Residential,
residential.
yeah.
I mean, commercial too, certainly, but at least in terms of like maybe who gets the job. But I think at the residential setting, it's we're in this small space with like people we see at every single job site, and so I think there's this like collegiality to it and level of trust that then maybe like with a friend or a family, like maybe you wouldn't, if you're building their house, you're like, oh, you're a friend or family, we don't need a contract. But at the end of the day, like we feel that strengthens our relationship to be really clear about what we expect. And I mean, it's basic stuff like cleanliness and storing materials, and like let's just all be clear on what we expect of each other, and then we can just focus on the work. And so that's I think it's slowly changing, what I'm seeing, on the residential
Hmm.
side of like maybe seeing some value. But at the end of the day, it's more expensive for us to be able to have that staffing to support that. But I firmly believe that having that maybe slightly more investment on the staff side can save headache and costs later with like fixing things that weren't put in right, or whatever it might be that like wasn't totally dialed in, or the communication didn't happen up front and you have to kind of tweak it later, whether that's fixing it or redoing it. And those things are really frustrating. We hear that a lot from trade partners, like, I want to be able to just do this once and do it right. And
Yeah,
super annoying for them to have to redo it because the scope changed, or they didn't know like this elevation didn't get updated on the plans, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a helpful level of structure that up levels everyone, in my opinion.
for sure. I mean, I hear like clarity being the
Yeah,
big driver there.
for
It's
sure.
like,
Yeah.
and like a part of clarity is knowing what you expect,
Yes.
and then having the confidence to articulate it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think clarity and knowing what you want can get maybe devalued, or like it just
Sure.
doesn't happen as
Yeah.
often
Yeah.
when you've got like this, we never build the same project twice, or like
So
it's
true.
so custom, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
We'll wing it.
but for sure. But I think what you're talking about, which, excuse me, is what you're talking about is like kind of applying more of these like commercial side. Like you've got these huge organizations that are, building huge roads or big commercial buildings, or, whatever it is. It's like they've got so many people in place, and it's absolutely imperative that they have to be clear and rigid on it. You start to introduce that, and it's like, this is what we expect and what the job site looks like in its cleanliness.
Yeah.
This is what we expect in terms of schedules being up to date. This is how we operate when it comes to setting expectations in contracts with clients, right?
Yeah.
I think that clarity piece is what I see the best builders really leaning into.
Yeah, I love that. The clarity word is key, because at the end of the day, it's not like I used rigidity earlier, but you're right. It's really about clarity and setting expectations. And we, as a team, like we believe in it so much. I don't know if you saw on our website recently, but we recently launched what we're calling an architects and engineers high performance or passive house design guide. And so what we recognize is that especially architects and engineers that haven't built or haven't designed a high performance home, they were struggling with like, how do you do window details? How do you transition the air barrier here? And so we've learned all these frustrations of having designs that don't lend themselves to easy execution in the field. And so we're like, let's just create some 3D drawings for our architects and engineers partners, put them in a guide, explain what we want and how we want it. Because at the end of the day, a verbal description of some of these things is not going to cut it, especially for an architect or an engineer that's a visual person. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we've taken it to that level of investing in a PDF that we have on our websites, free to download for anyone. We share it with all the architects that we work with. And it sets that clarity from the beginning. And then what benefits us. So we invested the time and energy to build that document, but now we're going to spend way less time and energy to, red line plans that we're getting once we're moving from schematic design to construction drawings. And so I love clarity. And I think I'll start using that with the team.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to. I think it's a universal word. We can all share it and use it.
Not trademarked.
Yeah, that's right. So I think, and just to the point of like, even for the listeners out there, right? It's like you get all these guys that are, and gals building these construction businesses, and they were someone in the trades, or they were in a different industry before, and they go into building homes, and like they have this like, an entrepreneurship has just been like blown up in the last, call it 10 years. Mm-hmm. But what would your like word of advice be for somebody who is like being like self-reflective in this moment, and they might have this realization that they aren't the most clear, or they aren't the best at setting expectations, and they might own a business, or they want to start a business? What would your advice be for that to really get this dialed?
Yeah, I think just taking learnings from other people in your space, other people in your region, like what are they doing well, to clearly communicate. One thing we have a lot in this region, we're really fortunate of, they have a lot of builders that they have hard hat tours, kind of just generally open to the public, go check out the job sites, see it under construction. I go to those, like I can learn from other builders and what they're doing. And so I think it's and even for me, like I know it was one of the early shows you had with that builder in South Carolina. It's like, he said, hey, reach out to me. And I did, you connected me with him. So I think it's like
Adam Copenhaver.
Yeah, totally.
Love Adam Copenhaver.
Adam's great. So just not being shy to engage with others. And the reality is there's things that, we've all learned that we can share. I think that's first and foremost. And, for me, like we like sharing and up leveling others, even with, in our own region. Like no joke, we had dinner with a bunch of people that, in theory are my competitors, but at the end of the day, I don't see them as a competitor. We're all trying to just build really good buildings, and there's tons of building happening and going around in our region. So I think that's like first and foremost, like don't feel like you can't call the person, across town and be like, hey, how are you tackling this? I'm sure they're willing to help you. So that's one thing. And I think it's, especially if you're starting a new company, just starting with that framework of openness and collaboration, because like I know a lot, but at the end of the day, our team together knows way more. And so like, I don't pretend in any way that I know the answer to every problem that we confront on a build. And we definitely like crowdsource that as a team. And I think it's just setting that foundation for that culture is really key, because it's hard to change it later, or harder to change it later. But I think, in no point is it too late. You just got to be intentional about it.
I think, and that's where I was going. I mean, do you think that you like the outcome of your organization, very collaborative, very open, very willingness to share, you essentially create an environment where no idea is a bad idea, right?
Totally.
Do you think that's just who you are? Did you ever struggle with that? Did you have to be intentional, and like you see friction building in your business and you're like, damn, I got to change something? Or is that just how you operate?
I think it's definitely my ethos for sure. But I think even if it's not your like natural state, I think you can build that muscle. And maybe you're not going to you're going to have a sticky note on your, laptop to be like, hey, don't forget to do this. I think there's ways to train the brain. And I truly believe that perspective, at least on the types of builds we're doing, is so helpful. And a good example would be like, we'll have a trade partner that's on the job that will have no problem coming up to either me or site manager to be like, hey, can we do it this way? And at the end of the day, that is helping that project to be more successful. So I think even if you're a little reticent to being in that space of being collaborative and open-minded, I do think being, pushing yourself to go into that zone is ultimately going to make a better project, in my opinion.
Totally. And I think that's like to where, if you can get to that level, change management isn't a challenge.
For sure.
And it's like, I think a lot of this like change management friction comes from people not being bought in, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're throwing all this new stuff out there and they don't know why, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a part of the conversation, if you're bringing it up, if there is that collaborative nature to the business and you're like getting the input from people that care about the topics that they're providing input on, it's just not even really a change management conversation. It's just how you operate as a business. It's like, we know things are going to be changing. We know that we're going to be getting more material. We know that we're going to be analytical about what's going on with the product, all with the vision of building the best home we possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think an anecdote that I've observed in numerous people on our jobs over the years is, we definitely explain to especially new trade partners that are coming on our job sites, like, why do we have an interior air barrier? Why is there so much insulation? And truly, because if you don't tell them why, they're not going to be invested in keeping that air barrier intact, or taping it, letting you know that they punctured it accidentally. And so we definitely focus on the why, and I think that's a key thing with any type of change management, whether it's on the business side with your systems or changing how you're approaching the build. And so we do that. And what I love is we always tell, especially mainly the MEP trade partners, like, look, you're going to penetrate the air barrier. Just let the site manager know. We'll fix it for you. And we've gotten to the point where a lot of them, they grab the roll of tape, they get the little spatula that kind of adheres it into the membrane, and they're owning keeping that air barrier intact. It's not their job whatsoever, but we've gotten to the point where, like, they understand the why, and therefore they're investing in being able to help you, deliver on that why.
Totally. You're a special person, Matt. I appreciate you jumping on. I appreciate you jumping on the podcast. You're a wealth of knowledge. I'm just laughing. I'm like, we were so fortunate to have people that care about the little spatula.
Oh, I love, it's in my back
the
pocket
adhesive.
at all times. Yeah.
With the what is it? The air barrier?
It's the air barrier. Yeah. It's a lot of these, high quality tapes are pressure sensitive. So, like, zip tape is the same, and all the stuff from Proclima and Sega, they're all pressure sensitive. So yeah, pretty much everyone on the team has one of those in their back pocket, and it's a good tool for other things. Which, because if I see a hole in the air barrier, I'm gonna go grab that tape and do it right then, even if I'm just running through the job.
I love it. I appreciate you. I look forward to the next time that we talk. This has been a great episode.
Thanks so much, Reece.
Awesome. We'll see you soon.
Take care.